That scope is older than I am. Staff Sergeant Ryan Mack said it under his breath, half turned toward Corporal Singh on his left, but not quietly enough. The firing line at Quantico's Scout Sniper School known distance range was outdoors, and the October morning carried sound clearly in the way that cool air does. Not amplified, just unobstructed. The old man, 3 positions to Mac's right, settling a Remington 700 onto the bench with both hands, heard it without showing any sign of having heard it. The scope in question was a Unertl 10-power fixed, a design unchanged since the 1950s. The glass faintly yellowed at the lens edges, the body worn to bare metal at the objective bell where decades of handling had taken the finish off. No illuminated reticle, no elevation turrets with ballistic compensation, no ranging marks. A simple crosshair in glass that the Marine Corps had stopped issuing before Ryan Mack was born. The rifle it sat on was a Remington 700 in .308 Winchester, bedded stock, free-floated barrel, the wood worn smooth and deep from 50-plus years of use. It was, by every measurable standard of the modern sniper community, a museum piece brought to a precision shooting evaluation. The old man adjusted the rifle on the bench rest with 2 quiet movements and said nothing. What Ryan Mack did not know, what none of the 12 scout sniper candidates in that morning's wind call evaluation knew, because Chief Warrant Officer Reark had introduced the guest as a former Marine, and nothing further, was that the man with the 50-year-old scope had been reading wind on open terrain since 1969, that he had made shots in paddy fields and on jungle ridgelines and across desert wadis and in mountain passes in 3 separate decades of conflict, with equipment that was always 1 generation behind what the enemy expected, in conditions that no Kestrel weather meter could have modeled, that he held the record, still, as of the previous year, still standing, for the longest confirmed wind-compensated shot in Marine Corps Scout sniper history, with a manual data book and no electronic equipment. He had been invited to Quantico by CWO for Reark, specifically, because the current class was failing the wind call evaluation, failing it badly. And Reark had run out of ways to explain what he needed them to understand in language they could reach from inside their current knowledge. He had called Leonard Cross. Leonard had said, "I'll need 1 shot." Reark had said, "Take whatever you need." If you believe that there are things a man can learn in war that no classroom has ever replicated, type wind in the comments right now. Because what Leonard Cross did at that firing line, and what it cost him across 3 decades to know how to do it, is the kind of story that this school has been telling its students since the morning it happened. His full name was Leonard Ray Cross. He had been born in Hardin County, Kentucky, in the winter of 1945, the youngest child of a tobacco farmer and a woman who had once, briefly, before the children came, taught music. He had grown up in the particular silence of farmland in winter, the specific quiet of flat fields under low gray sky, where the wind was the loudest thing and you learned to read it the way you learned to read the face of someone you lived with, not by instruments, but by long attention. His father hunted. His older brothers hunted. Leonard had hunted from the time he was 9, starting with squirrel and rabbit and moving to deer by 12. And what the Hardin County winters had given him, without intending to give him anything, was an education in moving air. How wind behaved differently over open ground versus at a tree line. How it banked off hillsides and came back changed. How a field that looked calm from a distance was never calm close up. And how you learned the difference by watching the grass at the near edge, the grass at the middle, and the grass at the far edge simultaneously. 3 numbers, not 1. And understanding that the wind your rifle lived in was the composite of all three. He had enlisted in the Marine Corps in January of 1964, at 18. He had gone to boot camp at Paris Island and had been assessed, on the rifle range at the end of recruit training, with a score that his drill instructor had walked 3 steps toward without saying anything, and then turned around and walked back. He had requested Scout Sniper School after infantry training. He had been accepted. He had graduated first in his class. He had served 3 tours. The first tour, 1966 to 1967, had been in Quang Tri Province. Paddy country, flat and wet, open terrain where the wind came off the South China Sea and crossed the coastal plain without interruption for miles before it reached whatever you were looking at. He had learned in that terrain that the wind over flat, open ground was the most deceptive wind in the world, because it looked simple, looked uniform, and was neither. The absence of obstacles did not mean the absence of variation. It meant the variation was subtler. It meant you had to be more still and more patient to read it. The second tour, 1969 to 1970, had produced the shot that was in the record books. Rice Paddy, Quang Tri Province, February of 1969. A target at 800 yards across open paddy in the hour before first light, half moon providing the only illumination. Wind reading confirmed at 9 minutes before the shot was taken. Not because Leonard was slow, but because the paddy wind was shifting in a 2-minute cycle that required him to watch 3 full cycles before he could characterize it. His spotter, a corporal named Edmonds from Galveston, Texas, had said nothing for those 9 minutes. He had understood what was happening. The shot had connected. Leonard had noted the wind call, the holdover, the time of engagement, and the range in his data book in the same small, careful printing he used for every entry. He had handed the data book to his platoon commander at the debrief. The commander had read the entry and looked at him. "You waited 9 minutes," the commander said. "The wind cycled every 2 minutes," Leonard said. "I needed 3 cycles." In the dark. "Yes, sir." "How did you read the wind in a rice paddy at 0200 hours? Leonard had thought about this for a moment. "The paddy grass," he said, "and the water surface. Paddy water moves different than grass. You read both, and you triangulate." The commander had passed the data book to the battalion intelligence officer, who had passed it upward, and the engagement had eventually been documented and filed as the longest confirmed wind-compensated precision shot in Marine Corps Scout sniper records at that time, a record that had been approached but not exceeded in the 55 years since, and that remained in the school's historical record as a reference case for instruction. Leonard had not known it was in the curriculum until Rirk had told him, on the phone, that the current class had been reading his data book entry for 3 weeks and still could not do what it described. The third tour, 1972 to 1973, had been his last. He had left the Marine Corps in 1974 with a chest full of decorations he kept in a flat box in the closet and a data book methodology that he had spent the next 46 years refining in deer stands and at long-range matches and on the consulting visits to sniper schools that Rirk's call was the latest in a long series of. He had been married for 51 years to a woman named June, who had died of a stroke in 2021 and whom he missed every morning when he woke up in the house in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, that they had bought together in 1978. He drove a 2004 Chevrolet Impala that ran perfectly because he maintained it himself. He was, in every visible particular, a quiet old man. He was also, in one very specific and non-visible particular, the best wind reader the Marine Corps Scout Sniper program had ever documented. The wind call evaluation was the phase of sniper school that broke more candidates than any other. Not the marksmanship itself. The candidates who reached Phase 2 could all shoot. What they could not reliably do, in the variable crosswind conditions of the Quantico known distance range in autumn, was read the wind accurately enough across the full distance to the 1,000-yard target to put a round where it needed to go on the first shot. The Quantico range had a specific problem that the instructors called the reversal. At the firing line, the wind ran left to right, southwest, off the Potomac drainage, consistent and measurable. At approximately the 600-yard mark, where the tree lines on both sides of the range created a channeling effect between them, the wind reversed. Right to left, approximately 2 miles per hour stronger, and variable in a pattern that changed with the temperature and the time of day. The result was that a shooter who read the wind at the firing line and applied a standard correction was always wrong. Not slightly wrong, structurally wrong, in a way that put rounds 6 to 10 inches off at 1,000 yards, which was a miss in any meaningful application of the skill. The class had been working this range for 4 days. Not one of the 12 candidates had produced a first-round hit at 1,000 yards in the reversal conditions. Mac, the class leader, the best technical shooter, had come closest, his rounds consistently landing 5 to 6 inches right of center, which meant he was reading the firing line wind correctly and not accounting for the reversal at all. Riark had explained the reversal. He had diagrammed it. He had shown the candidates wind data from previous sessions. He had had them stand at the 600-yard mark and feel the wind change direction against their faces. He had done everything he knew how to do. They still could not read it from the firing line. This was the problem he had called Leonard about, not the technique. The technique was documented. The problem was the feel. The problem was that reading a wind reversal across 1,000 yards of channeled terrain required a quality of attention that could not be learned from a diagram or a Kestrel meter or a data book. It could only be learned by watching someone who had it, watching them do it once, and then understanding, viscerally in the body rather than the mind, what the watching was supposed to feel like. Leonard Cross had been watching wind for 60 years. He took his position at the bench without asking anyone for help and without requiring any. The rifle went on to the rest in 2 movements. He checked the scope adjustment, 1 turn left, 1 turn back, a small click, and set his natural point of aim. Then he put the rifle down and looked down range. He did not look at the target. He looked at the near grass, the grass at the first 100 yards, which was moving right to left at what his long experience told him was roughly 4 miles per hour, which meant the reversal was already in play earlier than the 600-yard mark today, which meant the temperature differential between the tree lines was greater than average this morning, which meant the reversal would be stronger than the standard documentation described. He looked at the mid-range grass, the visible grass at the 400-yard mark, which was barely moving, and the barely moving grass at 400 yards with a 4-mile wind at the firing line meant the wind was dying in the middle, which meant there was a dead zone somewhere between 300 and 500 yards where the 2 air masses met. He looked at the tree line at the right side of the range, 600 yards out. The upper branches were moving left to right. The lower branches were still, which meant the reversal was running below the tree crown, ground-level air, not elevated air, and was stronger close to the surface, which meant his bullet, traveling at its lowest trajectory arc at the 800-yard mark, was going to be in the strongest part of the reversal for the last 200 yards of its flight. He watched for 6 minutes. Mac, 2 positions left, was watching him watch the wind, and the expression that had started as amusement at the old scope had become something he could not name. Not respect yet. He did not have enough information for respect. Just the beginning of a question he had not anticipated having to ask. Leonard picked up his data book. He wrote 3 numbers in it: the firing line wind, the dead zone estimate, and the reversal estimate at 1,000 yards. He converted them to a composite hold, not a standard correction, not what the Kestrel had told Mac, but a weighted average that gave the reversal 4 times the weight of the near wind because the bullet would spend 4 times as long in it. He picked up the rifle. He settled behind the scope. He said, to no one in particular, in the same quiet voice he used for everything, "Call the shot, please." Riark, from the back of the line, said, "Firing." Leonard found the 1,000-yard target in the Unertl's yellowed glass. The reticle was a simple crosshair. No ranging marks. No wind compensation dots. Nothing but the intersection of 2 lines and the target at the end of them. He held for the composite correction. He breathed once. He fired. The round traveled 1,000 yards in just over 1 second. The steel target rang, a clean, distinct strike. The sound arriving at the line 3 seconds after the shot. The spotting scope operator at the station said, in a voice that came out quieter than he intended, "Center. Dead center." The firing line went silent. Not the silence of confusion, the silence of 12 people recalibrating simultaneously. Mac was looking at his Kestrel meter on his wrist. It was showing him the same firing line wind it had been showing him for 4 days. It had not changed. The reading was accurate, and it had sent every one of his rounds 5 inches right for 4 days. He looked at the old man, who had set the rifle down and was uncapping his data book to make a follow-up notation. "You held left," Mac said. It was not quite a question. "The wind is right. You held left." Leonard wrote the notation and capped the book. "The wind at the line is right," he said. "The wind at 1,000 yards is left. Your bullet spends more time in the far wind than the near wind. You have to give it more weight." He looked at Mac. "Your Kestrel is telling you the truth. It's just telling you a partial truth." "How did you know the reversal was stronger today than the standard data?" "The near grass was 4 miles. The reversal is usually documented at 2 miles stronger. But the tree line branches, upper branches right to left, lower branches still. Low air, not high air. Ground level reversal is always stronger. Today's probably running 3 to 4 miles above the standard, not 2. Mac stared at him. "You got all that from the grass and the tree branches." "And 6 minutes," Leonard said. Subscribe to the Old Guard right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what CW04 Riark does next, and what he tells this class about why he invited Leonard Cross to Quantico, is the part of this story that 3 generations of Marine snipers have been learning from ever since. Riark walked to the front of the firing line. He had been standing at the back for the entire demonstration, arms crossed, watching. He had watched Leonard watch the wind for 6 minutes. He had watched the shot. He had heard the target ring. He had heard Mac's questions and Leonard's answers. He stood in front of the class, and he did not speak for a moment. He looked at the 12 candidates, then at Leonard, then back at the class. "Gunnery Sergeant Cross," he said, and the use of the rank, which Leonard had not worn in 46 years, was not ceremony. It was precision. It was Riark telling the class, before he said another word, what category of person was standing at that bench. Gunnery Sergeant Cross served 3 combat tours with the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Program between 1966 and 1973. He holds the school record for the longest confirmed wind-compensated precision shot with manual data in Marine Corps history. 800 yards. Rice paddy terrain, 0200 hours. February of 1969. With a 9-minute wind read in conditions that had no instrument-readable reference points. He paused. His databook entry from that engagement has been in the school curriculum since 1981. You have been reading it for 3 weeks. The class was completely still. Mac looked at the old man. He looked at the worn Remington on the bench. He looked at the yellowed Unertl scope. He looked at the databook in Leonard's breast pocket. "The reason I brought him here," Rirk said, "is not to show you the shot. The shot is not the lesson." He looked at Mac specifically, though he addressed all of them. The lesson is the 6 minutes. The lesson is what he was looking at for 6 minutes that your Kestrel cannot tell you. The lesson is the difference between a reading and a read. He paused again. A reading is a number. A read is an understanding. Your instruments give you readings. Gunnery Sergeant Cross gives you a read. There is a gap between those two things, and that gap is where your rounds are landing. He looked at Leonard. "Would you be willing to take them through it?" he said. "The 6 minutes." Leonard looked at the 12 candidates. "One at a time," he said. "Lie down next to me and watch what I watch. I'll tell you what I'm seeing as I see it." He looked down the range for a moment. "It's going to take a while. The wind is not a simple thing today." Riark said, "We have the range until 1700. What followed was 6 hours. Not 6 hours of demonstration, 6 hours of Leonard Cross lying prone at the firing line, one candidate beside him at a time, talking through what he was reading in the grass and the tree branches and the paddy flat quality of the air over the range in that particular October morning. He had each candidate watch for 5 minutes before telling them anything, because the 5 minutes of watching without knowing what to look for was, he explained, the most important 5 minutes. It trained the eye to move in the right sequence before the mind had a framework to impose on what it was seeing. He fired 6 shots total across the afternoon, one after each of the first 6 candidates completed their 5-minute watch, to show them the correction that the watch had produced. Every shot was a first-round center hit at 1,000 yards. The same shot. Different reading each time, because the wind changed through the day. The same method. The same 6-minute patience. The same 3 grass reads and the tree line assessment and the composite hold. Mac was the 4th candidate to lie beside him. He watched for 5 minutes without speaking, and Leonard watched beside him and said nothing. And at the end of 5 minutes, Leonard said, "Tell me what you saw." Mac described the near grass and the mid-range dead zone and the tree line. He got the near grass right. He got the dead zone approximately right. He got the tree line wrong. He had read the upper branches and not the lower, and had not understood what the difference between them meant. Leonard told him about the lower branches, about ground-level air, about why low air was stronger in the reversal, and how to look for the height at which the air was moving versus the height at which it was still. Mac listened in the specific way that people listen when they are not waiting for a pause to speak, but are actually absorbing. He was still for a long time after Leonard finished. Then he said, 9 minutes, in a rice paddy, at 0200 hours. Yes, Leonard said. What were you reading? There's no grass in a paddy. The paddy water surface, Leonard said. Moonlight on moving water shows direction and approximate speed if you know what to look for, and the grass on the dike edges at the far end, and the shadow of the far tree line on the water. The shadow edge moves when the high air is shifting. He looked downrange. You take what the terrain gives you. You don't need everything. You need enough. Mac was quiet for a moment longer. When did you know you had enough? He said. After 3 cycles, Leonard said. 2 minutes each. The wind was cycling. You always want 3 cycles before you characterize a cycling wind. 1 cycle might be a gust. 2 might be coincidence. 3 is the pattern. He picked up his data book and showed Mac the entry from February of 1969. The small, careful printing. The 3 wind numbers, the dead zone, the reversal, the composite hold, the range in yards, the shot time, and at the bottom of the entry, in the same unhurried hand, shot taken at 02:11. First round, center. Cycle confirmed at 3 before firing. Mac read it. He read it a second time. You wrote this the same night, he said. Always write it the same session, Leonard said. While the conditions are still in your memory, the numbers are no good if you don't know what they felt like. He capped the data book and put it in his pocket. Shot, that's the other thing your instruments can't store, he said. What it felt like. That lives in here. He put his hand briefly on his chest. And it only gets there one way. Leonard drove home to Elizabethtown that evening in the 2004 Impala, arriving just after 9 o'clock. He put the rifle on its rack in the spare room, next to the framed photograph of the rice paddy range, taken by Edmonds on a disposable camera the morning after the shot in 1969. A young Marine prone at a dike edge in first light, the paddy stretching flat and silver behind him. He made a cup of coffee. He sat at the kitchen table and wrote the day's entry in the current data book, the 6th book in the series that went back to 1966. Wind conditions at Quantico, October 23rd. Variable reversal, 6 candidates, 6 shots. Notes on what each candidate saw and what they missed. What Mac had asked about the paddy. What he had answered. At the bottom of the entry he wrote, as he wrote at the bottom of every significant entry, what the terrain gave, what I took, what the round did. He closed the book. He sat with his coffee for a while in the quiet kitchen, and he thought about Edmonds from Galveston, who had been killed in 1971 and whose family Leonard still wrote to every November. He thought about June. He thought about the 12 young faces on the firing line today and the specific quality of attention on Mac's face in the last hour of the session, which was the quality that meant a thing had been learned rather than heard. He washed his cup. He went to bed at 10, as he always did. There are men in this country who hold records in the things that keep other men alive, and who live quietly in small houses and drive old cars and come when called and lie prone on a firing line for 6 hours with 12 young snipers because the school asked them to, and who write the day's entry in the same data book methodology they have been using since 1966, and who do not consider any of this remarkable. To them, it is just the work. It has always been the work. The remarkable thing, the thing that takes your breath away if you are paying attention, is not the shot. It is the 6 minutes before the shot. The patience, the 3 cycles of wind. The grass at 3 distances read simultaneously. The lower tree branches that the instruments do not measure. The composite hold that gives the far wind 4 times the weight of the near wind because the bullet lives 4 times as long in it. The remarkable thing is that Leonard Cross has been doing that since 1969, and that for most of those years, nobody asked him to come and show them, and that when they finally did, he said yes immediately, asked for 1 shot, and was there at 0700 with the 50-year-old rifle and the yellowed scope and the data book that had never stopped being filled. Subscribe to The Old Guard For the men who learned in places we should never forget, who come when called, and who ask only for one shot. Hit the bell, don't miss the next one. The Kestrel gives you a reading. Leonard Cross gives you a read. There's a lifetime of difference between those two things, and it lives in the 6 minutes before the trigger.